All right, let's get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I am Jackie Reed. Thank you so much for joining the American Red Cross and the National Baptist Convention for an evening of coffee and conversation. Now, tonight we're discussing sickle cell disease and how it impacts the Black community. We have three dynamic panelists for you who come with a wealth of knowledge and experience. So get ready to get some great information that you're going to need for tonight. Now, please welcome Dr. Yvette Miller, Ms. Natasha Thomas, and Ms. Lottie Miner. Now, before we jump right into it, let me share a little bit about these women. Dr. Yvette Marie Miller is the Executive Medical Officer for the American Red Cross Donor and Client Support Center in Charlotte. Dr. Miller has served in various leadership capacities at the Red Cross, including Regional Medical Director and Director of Platelet Collections and Clinical Services. Her areas of interest include promoting diversity in the blood supply, increasing donor recruitment, and retention in the Black community. Natasha Thomas is someone with the sickle cell trait. Early in life, after a series of unexplained hospitalizations, Natasha was diagnosed with sickle cell disease at the age of 7. She currently works for Sickle Cell Disease Association of America as the Development and Special Events Coordinator. It is her passion, along with SCDAA, to continue to bring awareness to this disease and continue to support all efforts to find a cure. And Lottie Miner, also known as First Lady Miner of the Hill Hernando Baptist Church in Hernando, Mississippi. She currently serves as a project director for Oak Hill Regional Community Development Corporation's Navigator Grant and Healthy Kids Initiatives, grants that were awarded to Oak Hill by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services due to the Hills and State Convention's ongoing efforts to alleviate health disparities in the Mississippi Delta. In all her affiliations, whether secular or religious, Baptist or ecumenical, Lady Miner's mission is to inspire and empower women by simply showing them Christ-like love. Welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation, and let's get to it. And Natasha, I'll start with you. You are a sickle cell patient and understand firsthand how this disease affects lives. Why is this discussion so important?
Thank you so much, Jackie, and thank you to the National Baptist Convention, NBC, and also American Red Cross for being here and for doing this important webinar. Sickle cell disease is not only something I live with daily, but it's a very important topic because it's so misunderstood and it's such a complicated disease that affects everyone differently. sickle cell disease is something that you can't put into a box and say it's one thing. It's so many different things. And, there's still people that's not aware that this is still prevalent and it's still a concern in our community. And it's such a huge issue for individuals and families living with this disease. So this is a great topic. Again, September is Sickle Cell Awareness Month. And with all the organizations represented here today, every day, we want to get the word out to more and more people so that they can know what families are going through living with this disease.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted you to talk a little bit more, Natasha, about your experience, because as you said, this disease impacts each body, each person differently, and also how you respond to treatment varies from person to person. Tell us a little bit more specifically about your experience.
Okay. Well, I'll start off when I was diagnosed at 7. So I am one of 7 kids, and so my mom, I had an older brother. And we are a year apart, born on the same day, a year apart. And so my mom experienced sickle cell. He was diagnosed with sickle cell. I'm not sure what age he was. So my mom had experience with him going through a sickle cell crisis for the first year. So when I started complaining of some of the same issues that he was having, she told the doctors, I think my daughter may have sickle cell disease as well. I think you should test her. But they didn't believe her. They didn't want to believe her because, she doesn't have a degree. So what does she know? So she pushed and pushed, and she's my biggest advocate today. And she finally got them to test me. And of course, I had sickle cell disease. And so growing up with this disease, me and my brother, we would trail one another in the hospital. Certain things can exacerbate a sickle cell pain crisis, and that's what they call some of the major episodes that we go through. The most prevalent aspects of sickle cell disease is going through a pain crisis. And so, sometimes we would go to the, originally from the Caribbean, and sometimes we would go to the ocean and I would get out of the water. And because that cold air hits my body, that can put me into a sickle cell crisis. And that pain is indescribable. Just think of the worst pain you have ever had and multiply times 10. And so that pain is racking your body where you need narcotics, pain medicine to alleviate that pain. And that can put you into the hospital. I've been in the hospital from a few days up to 2 weeks. And so, and I didn't know anybody else with sickle cell disease. I knew it was me and my brother. Thank God my other siblings didn't have the disease, so they didn't go through what we were going through. And so when I moved to the States, that was such a different an eye-opener. In Trinidad, our healthcare was free, so me going to the hospital didn't cause my parents to have huge medical bills coming home. The first time I had a pain crisis here, I spent one night in the hospital and had this huge hospital bill, and that was a shocker. And so health insurance is key to this disease. And again, so I'm like going into the hospital and, doctors, there's a pain scale of 1 to 10, and they'll ask you, sometimes my pain could be in a 7 to a 10, sometimes it could be past 10. And so I had to learn what my pain threshold was. I had to learn what worked best for me going into the hospital. I had to have advocate, which my mom was my biggest advocate. Sometimes I would go into the hospital so much pain, I'm not able to talk. So I need somebody there to help advocate for me and let the doctors know what worked best. At one point, I became not immune, but certain drugs stopped working, certain pain medicine stopped working because I built up a tolerance for it and it wouldn't work anymore. So we had to change. And so you always have to change and pivot with sickle cell disease because, again, it's affecting your entire body. My experience was different from my brother's experience. He experienced some bone loss. I've never had to experience that. And so just the day-to-day, being in pain almost every day. Minor pain to going into a crisis, it could be major pain. But I was still able to live a full life. I have sickle cell SC, and I learned my type when I got to the United States. I didn't know my type growing up. SS is the most complicated, SC is just as complicated. And so I had to learn what would work best for me in each situation.
Well, thank you for sharing. And I will just say for those listening, my dog is bark. He is at war with the garbage man. And of course, as timing would have it, they are picking up the trash right now, but I'm going to mute when you all are talking. So bear with me, everybody. But thank you for sharing that, you know, and it just speaks to so much of what you talked about. But thank God your mother was such an advocate for you, because that's a whole other seminar, you know, to talk about how patients, particularly patients of color, are not believed by healthcare professionals. But that is a whole other conversation. But thank you for sharing that. Yvette, let me get to you. You work directly with the American Red Cross, who's launching this initiative to increase blood donations in the Black community. Why does it matter so much to target the Black community?
So thank you so much, Jackie, for the invitation for coffee and conversation and to talk about sickle cell disease. So in this country, about 100,000 people have sickle cell disease, the great majority of whom are African American or of African descent. So as African Americans, we have some fairly unique proteins or antigens on our red blood cells that for patients that require frequent transfusions like those with sickle cell disease, there has to be a close match between the donor of that blood product and the recipient. And this can prevent some of the complications of sickle cell disease. And as Natasha has already mentioned, it can help treat a pain crisis. So that's why it's so important for African Americans and people of African descent to donate blood to ensure that we have adequate amounts of blood available to treat the pain crisis and the complications of sickle cell disease.
And how's it going? I know a big part of the work you do is appealing to the African American community. Is it, and we're going to talk about COVID and the pandemic later, but just in general, what's that effort like? What's the response like from the Black community?
So in general, the blood supply donated by African Americans is around 4% of the blood supply. And of course, you know, African Americans make up about 12 to 13% of the population. So we desperately need, there's an ongoing, always present need for African Americans to donate blood to meet the transfusion needs of patients with sickle cell disease.
And Natasha, let me ask you, as a patient, has the lack of blood ever been an issue for you, or have you been fortunate enough not to have to deal with that yet?
I've been fortunate enough to not have to deal with that. But I have friends who that I've met during my journey here now in that who require chronic blood transfusions. About 2018, and because of my situation, I've never had to. My mom didn't trust it the first time the doctors offered it. She said, no, I don't trust, but that was back in the 70s. And so in 2018, I had the worst crisis of my life to date. And I needed that blood transfusion. I was in ICU. The doctor was like, we have to do it. And thank God it was available for me at the time when I needed it. And I don't know what would have happened if I didn't have that blood at that time. Going through that ICU. I was in the hospital for 9 days, in the ICU for about 5, and that stay could have been longer. If I didn't have the opportunity of having that blood transfusion, because it probably saved my life.
It just speaks to how important the work that the Red Cross does is. First Lady, let me bring you in here. You have been a health advocate for many years, and you've done some outstanding work within the church and the community. What impact does an organization like the National Baptist Convention have on this initiative?
That's a great question. Our churches, our houses of worship in the African American community have always had a tremendous impact on not only the persons who are members of those congregations, but also the communities that those churches serve. Any African American community in any major city or even in any small town, you can normally walk in and there is a church somewhere, and everybody knows the pastor of that church. And normally within our community, what your faith leader says is taken to heart And normally, 9 out of 10 times, their instructions, their direction, their guidance is well received, and people do what those faith leaders ask them to do. There is a very important place for trusted voices in the lives of people of color, because there have been so many occurrences in history, whether it was dealing with medical or research type situations or other occurrences where African Americans have felt like things have not gone the way that they would have wanted them to, or they felt perhaps where there has been disinformation and misinformation that has been disseminated to them for the gain of other folks. So what we find in the faith community is if our faith leaders, our conventions, our churches that are members of those conventions, disseminate information down to us, it is normally very, very easy to impact the behavior of that community. And we've been blessed in our convention, the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated. Dr. Jerry Young is our current president, and he is phenomenal. He really, really believes in reaching into the community to get out whatever information is necessary so that people can live better lives, not just spiritually, but mind, body, and spirit. Because, it's about the whole person, the triune being, mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah, you are so right. The church plays a tremendous role in leadership within the community. That's so true. Yvette, let me go back to you. It's interesting to hear Natasha just talk about dealing with the symptoms of sickle cell and the severe pain. I think a lot of people just don't realize how serious this is. What are the main misconceptions around sickle cell disease, Yvette?
Some of the misconceptions involve the fact that many people believe that there's a lot of knowledge and people understand and know a lot about sickle cell disease. And that is just not absolutely the case. Most of us probably had our first significant exposure to knowledge about sickle cell disease when we were in high school and, in that sophomore science class, and that's just about it. And so unless you know someone or you have a family member or you make it your responsibility to find out about sickle cell disease, there's a lack of knowledge in general about sickle cell disease. And so an important thing that Natasha mentioned was that, when people have a sickle cell crisis, the first thing that they need is pain medication. But for many folks, the second thing that they need for treatment is a blood transfusion because their red blood cells are abnormally shaped and they do not carry oxygen. And so to help, again, treat and alleviate that pain crisis, they have to have a blood transfusion with normal oxygen carrying red blood cells to treat that pain crisis. So thank you so much for sharing that knowledge, Natasha.
Yeah. Does it matter? Are you all looking for specific blood types when you're going around and taking these donations?
Well, we need blood of every type.
Okay.
A wonderful thing is that, African Americans have some of the largest, one of the largest percentages of individuals with O blood type. And O, of course, is the most common blood type. So we always need lots of O blood on the shelf, but we need donations from all donors, from all diverse communities to meet the transfusion needs of this patient population.
Okay. Lottie, as an organizer of the people, I'm sure that there are many questions, particularly as we tackle this pandemic. Are there any concerns with donating blood at this time? Are people coming out? Are they afraid to come out and give blood? Like, what's it been like during the pandemic?
I think the pandemic has just intensified some of the fears and some of the apprehensions that we have as a people. We've already addressed the fact that there has been so much misinformation and disinformation in years past that people are leery of a lot of things. And so what the faith community has tried to do is help them weed through the accurate information, make sure that they're getting information from the right places, not using the school of Facebook as their and I love Facebook. We're on Facebook tonight. I'm not disparaging Facebook, but the point I'm making is we want to make sure that people get information that is accurate and valid, and look at the links that are shared. I said all that to say there is fear about donating blood, but what we're trying to do is try to get rid of some of that fear by offering the right information. And I think once people understand the importance of blood donation, and once people understand that it is a safe process, that there is no harm done in the giving of the blood, most people are more willing then. Obviously, the pandemic, the new challenge that we're facing now with the pandemic is just the safety of blood donation sites. Once we get people past the fear of giving blood in and of itself, the fear of the safety of those sites comes into play. But we've been blessed that we've been able to share with folks that most medical facilities, I would say 99.98% of medical facilities are safe for individuals to go into if they want to donate blood. Most providers are vaccinated, so those individuals can feel safe with whatever provider may be drawing their blood. And we found that most facilities do everything they can to clean and sanitize. So just getting that information out, I think, has dispelled some of those natural fears and apprehensions that come about because of the pandemic.
And let's talk about those of us. I'm one of them. Yeah, although I am vaccinated and I have donated blood, but I hate needles. I'm afraid of needles. Let's just talk about it. Let's talk about the people out there who don't want to do this because they're afraid of needles. Let's ease those concerns. What can you say to those people? Lottie, I'll start with you, and Yvette, I'll let you chime in on that.
What I would say is that the needle stick is a few seconds of mild discomfort in comparison to the tremendous pain that a sickle cell sufferer like Natasha would experience. It goes away in a second. That would be my best way to dispel it. And of course, I'm one of those individuals like you, Jackie, who is petrified of needles. But as a faith community, we have to be prayerful about our fears. We have to face our fears head on. I think a fear of needles is a very legitimate fear, just like fear of going into the facilities because of the pandemic is a legitimate fear. But at some point, as a community of believers, we have to have more faith than fear, because we know we weren't given a spirit of fear.
Amen to that. Amen to that. I appreciate it. I received that. I
was encouraging myself with that as well.
Yes. Yvette, I'll let you chime in on that as well, because I know you all confront that a lot.
We do. That's a common issue that people have. And thank you so much, First Lady Minor, for stepping out and giving that information. And so I'm going to let Natasha give us the call to action. But the way I explain it is the same way that First Lady Minor explains it, is that for that moment of pain that it takes. I just donated blood yesterday, actually. So that moment of pain, to have that needle inserted in your arm, has no comparison to the chronic pain that people with sickle cell disease experience. And some of them experience it every single day. And their bodies, they just learn how to deal with some low levels of pain and know how to take care of themselves, but then have to go to the emergency room when it gets out of control. So the little bit of pain that I experience and that we experience when we roll up our sleeves and donate a unit of blood has no comparison to patients with sickle cell disease and how much pain they experience through their entire lives. And so we absolutely have to stand in the gap, for those patients. We, as African Americans, we love our community and we are firm supporters of each other. And so donating blood is just another way that we can support each other and help each other live our best and healthiest lives.
Absolutely. Now, you mentioned a call to action. How can people get involved? What are the first steps? And I think, is Natasha going to chime in on that?
I'll, you want to go ahead, Natasha?
Well, I was just going to say, in comparison to, worrying about that stick, just think of every time I go to the hospital, I'm a hard stick. So it takes them a couple of times to get, to start that IV to get me to get fluids into me, to get that pain medicine going so that I can, so that we can get control of that pain. And a pain episode could last for hours, and it could last for days, and it can last for weeks. And when you give blood, you're giving blood for probably a few minutes, you may be giving blood for an hour. But just think of not just helping someone like myself, just think of young kids who have to go through blood transfusions, who have to go through painful sickle cell crises. Just think of the babies. If you think of a little kid going through unimaginable pain, a needle stick would be nothing for you.
Yeah, that it really, we need to hear that it's important to say because people have those fears. But when you compare it to Natasha, what you described, and to think of a child going through that type of pain, is there's just no comparison, right? There's no comparison. I know that we want to take some questions from the audience, and we are waiting for those to come in. So hopefully we will get some questions. But Yvette, if you, I know when we spoke earlier, we talked about a specific web address that we want to give people. Can you give that out, or can someone give us the specific web address so that people know where to go if they want to find out more information about sickle cell, about giving blood? Can any of you ladies give us that specific address? We talked because there's a
Yeah.
backslash and a this and that. I said, let's get it right.
To make it simple, all you need to do is go to redcrossblood.org. That's it. And then
Okay.
you can, it's easily to navigate the website. You just put in to the search engine blood donation. Some of them, it may even populate when you go to redcrossblood.org, but it's incredibly easy to go to redcrossblood.org, put in your zip code, and the search engine can help you find a blood donation site or blood drive close to you. And then one of the other things that I want to talk about is one of the first things that people commonly say to me is that I've never donated blood because no one has ever asked me to donate blood.
Yeah.
So everyone within the sound of my voice, this is your ask and your invitation. So you cannot ever say that again. So go to redcrossblood.org, put in that search engine your zip code, and find a blood donation site close to you. And it's just a wealth of easily accessible information on our website. And I'm sure some questions are going to come in about blood donation, and you need to weigh just at least 110 pounds, be feeling healthy and well. Those are basically, the three things: make an appointment, be healthy and well, weigh at least 110 pounds, which most people in this country do.
Yes.
So, yes.
Well, I was going
So,
to ask, speaking of being healthy, and what are there any restrictions? If someone has a cold, or if there, are there any restrictions that people should keep in mind before they come and donate blood?
mhm. So one important thing is that people who are positive for sickle cell trait are eligible to donate blood. Let me say that again. People that
Oh,
are positive for sickle cell trait are eligible to donate blood. So if you, as you mentioned, if you're not feeling well, do not present to the blood donation site. That protects you, and that protects people at the donation site. Again, as Sister Lottie mentioned, we still continue to use the recommendations for the CDC. There is social distancing. Everyone has to wear a mask in the collection site, and there is frequent cleaning and hand sanitizer available. And we do encourage everyone to have an appointment, and that way we can control the social distancing at the blood donation site.
yeah. Natasha, let me ask you, let me bring you back into the conversation. Actually, I want to share, we did get a comment from someone out in the audience, and this is to all the panelists. And Natasha, I'll circle back with my question for you. But he says, thank you as a comment. Thank you for addressing the need to donate blood. We have people in our community who are willing to sell blood but not give blood. He said, what incentives work that move people to donate blood? I guess he's looking to kind of, encourage people in his community to donate. He said, what incentives motivate people? And that is from Richard Johnson, Richmond Johnson.
I'll go ahead, Sister Lottie. So thank you so much for that question. I think what motivates people to donate blood, particularly African Americans, is that they know they are helping support individuals in their community. Again, the great majority of people with sickle cell disease in this country are African American, of African descent. So just sharing that information is incredibly important. And we as Black people, that's always been so incredibly important, is for us to be there to love and support and help each other in a holistic way, again, as Sister Lottie mentioned. So it's our responsibility to support our community. That's really important. And many people know somebody, whether it's somebody they work with, they have a family member, they know somebody that has sickle cell disease. And so they can directly relate to that relationship that they have with somebody with sickle cell disease, and they know what to do. Donating blood is the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Natasha, I wanted to bring you back in here. And this comes from our audience, another comment. And she says she doesn't know if this was already addressed. If not, was bone marrow mentioned? And it was not mentioned in this conversation. But I wonder for you, Natasha, I know that is a big part of the treatment for sickle cell disease. I don't want to get too personal with you, but, can you just talk a little bit about the importance of bone marrow?
Yeah, so there's a lot of new research being done on bone marrow and gene therapy. And if you go to sicklecelldisease.org, where I work in, our organization talks a lot about both. And we've done webinars, we've done different things. I remember when one of my sisters, I have 4 sisters, beautiful women. And I remember when one of my sisters had her child, she said, could we use the cord blood to maybe help you, go through bone marrow and gene therapy? NIH right now is doing research to find a cure for sickle cell disease. But it's not a one size fits all, because sickle cell disease is so complicated, and some of them, I'm now 46, I'll be prayerfully 47 in November. And I've had a lot of complications, a lot of issues with sickle cell disease. I've had my gallbladder removed. I've had multiple pain episodes where it degraded some of my bone. And so sometimes gene therapy or bone marrow transplant may not be healthy for someone with sickle cell disease, but it's cured a number of individuals with sickle cell disease. But it's not a universal cure because it's so complicated. But we're in such a great time living with sickle cell disease. Now there's new therapies. I started this new therapy that was FDA approved. Last year, there was 2 new drugs FDA approved for sickle cell disease. And I started one at Exhale last October. And it was a struggle the first couple of months. But since then, we're now in August, and I've had 1 crisis this year. Normally, I would have already had 2 or 3. I needed to be hospitalized. So that's working for me. And so it's working for a lot of people. And there's a lot of new treatment. And so there's still a lot of research being done. There's still a lot more to go. We need funding. There's still not a lot of funding for sickle cell disease because it's so complicated, and it's still considered a rare disease. But there's lots of money going towards cancer and other diseases. So we need legislative, we need funding, and that's going to get us where we need to be.
Yeah, very well said. First Lady, let me ask you this question. There might be some people out there listening who say, you know what? Not only do I want to donate blood myself, but I want to organize a blood drive. Talk about what goes into, organizing something like this, to organizing, a blood drive.
It would be a grassroots type organization process. normally something like that can be backed or promoted or sponsored by the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated or by individual churches, but the organization starts in the grassroots with the people. It's driven by the people who want it. I'll say it this way. Our health ministry for National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated would love to come into any city or town and help people learn to be healthier, but it would go over so much better if people who already live there started themselves with trusted voices that they personally know. Then, of course, if we've got to come in and train some health ambassadors or do whatever it takes to get them to the next level, that can certainly happen. But it starts with committed individuals who live in those communities, who attend those churches, who know the providers, who know the people. That's how it starts. And then, of course, so social media, church announcements, those are great ways to get the word out so that people who most need the help can get it.
Yeah. Yvette, Natasha talked earlier about her mother seeing those symptoms early and advocating for her, with medical professionals. How does someone know, what are the symptoms that they could have, this disease?
So many children have their first sickle cell crisis when they're about 6 months of age. And that's because when we're born, we have a type of hemoglobin called fetal hemoglobin, which is really efficient at carrying oxygen. But at about 6 months of age, we switch over to what is called adult hemoglobin, which is not as efficient as carrying oxygen, and babies can have their first crisis at 6 months. And it is incredibly painful. Their hands and feet can swell up and they're just really irritable and cry. And so that is the first, first thing that the parents notice is that their child can just not be comforted and their hands and feet swell. Wow. And then as you get older, as Natasha said, she had her first crisis when she was 7 years old. So again, sickle cell disease can present at any age. And the first time that she presented, the first symptoms that she had was a pain crisis, which is how the major presentation is for most people, is starting with a pain crisis. It starts, and Natasha, I invite you to explain, how it starts. But for many people, I've had it described to me, it starts as sort of this gnawing pain like a toothache. And then they try to get comfortable. They maybe drink fluids or take something like ibuprofen just to try to get off the pain, but it just gets worse and worse and worse. And there's nothing that they can do. And they end up having to go to the emergency room. And as Natasha mentioned, narcotics, particularly opioids, are some of the first medications that they get.
Yeah. Oh gosh. It just sounds so horrific. And to think about a 6-month-old who cannot communicate, well about what they're dealing with. So hopefully any parents listening to this will look out for this, or be helped if they, think that their child is dealing with this, or they're dealing with it themselves. This is just heartbreaking. Well, we are, running out of time for this Q&A, but I wanted to give our panelists an opportunity to have some final comments. And Natasha, I'll start with you. Anything you want to say to our audience to encourage them to, donate blood, learn more about sickle cell, be an advocate for someone like you.
Thank you, Jackie and Dr. Yvette, for putting it so elegantly, and Dr. Pastor Minor. Just want to say to the community that just learn more about sickle cell disease. The more we're talking about it, the more we can make it not a secret. There's still a lot of people living with sickle cell disease that don't want to talk about it at all because it's such a stigma. You go to the hospital because if you look at me, you can say, oh, she don't look like she has a chronic illness. She could be faking it. And it's hard to show pain on paper, right? It's hard to show pain. You may have some swelling, but sometimes you may not have any swelling. So it's hard to show pain, but just be compassionate. Just learn as much as you can about sickle cell disease, about any chronic disease. Thank God now we have newborn screening. So every baby born of African descent or Hispanic descent is tested for sickle cell disease. That's one of the genetic testing that's done at birth. And they would immediately put you in touch with a hematologist or your physician or pediatrician that can treat sickle cell disease, or one of our community-based organizations that help families deal with the disease, because hearing a newborn has a disease, a painful disease, can be jarring. But the support system is needed. Advocacy is needed. I wouldn't be here today without my mom, without my siblings, without my church family, without my friends, without my, just everybody supporting me. I've been able to live a full life. I have a 17-year-old who is about to, he's a senior now in high school, and it takes a village. And with this disease, it takes a village. And so just learn more. Blood donations is important. There's also a registry. Somebody asked about bone marrow. There's also a Beta Match registry that you can sign up with if you want to donate or find out more about bone marrow donation. And so there's a lot, and it's an exciting time. There's a lot more research being done. There's a lot of new treatments coming out for sickle cell disease, even though we still lose a lot of people that we shouldn't lose. Just the more people we get to talk about it, the more awareness that we can bring, the more funding that we can get access to, the more help that someone with this disease or a new parent going through this can get help for.
Natasha, after explaining all that you have gone through for, all of your life, it is so amazing to hear how hopeful you are. Where does that come from?
It comes from my foundation of my family, first and foremost, and that spiritual foundation. When you go through what I have gone through, what someone with sickle cell going through a chronic disease, it's nothing but God that can get through it sometimes. Sometimes you're in such pain, all you can do is cry out to God. And because of my family, because of the support system that I've had, it's my parents never made me feel different. Me and my siblings, we fought and we played. And, I went to school and have had jobs. And sickle cell, I have sickle cell doesn't have me. And so I want to enjoy my life. It can be limited sometimes, but I don't let it control my life. And so, but that foundation of family is really where it started.
That's beautiful. I love hearing that. Yvette, before you give your final comments, I did want to ask about this. And forgive me, I just don't know enough about sickle cell, and I've learned so much here today. I'm so happy to be a part of this. Is there anything that triggers it? And is there anything, diet, lifestyle, that can, kind of hold off those symptoms or make them not as extreme?
So some of the common things that can trigger crisis is being dehydrated. Drinking plenty of water and fluids is so incredibly important. Something that we don't have a lot of control over is changes in weather. When it's extremely hot or extremely cold, that can trigger a crisis. And, whenever you get a cold or are not feeling well, that can trigger a crisis. So there are so many things that we can do in terms of lifestyle that can help people stay healthy. But one of my primary recommendations is stay hydrated, because I know for many patients, when they again start to feel that pain coming on, they just make sure that they hydrate, and that can definitely be incredibly helpful.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if there are any studies or anything on this, but for folks who have sickle cell and then contract COVID, how does COVID impact sickle cell? Do we know? And I'm springing this one on you, but I don't know if there are any studies on that. So if they're not, just forgive me for throwing it out there, but I'm just curious.
Well, in general, so one of the primary symptoms of COVID is lung infection. And people who have sickle cell disease, they can commonly develop what's called acute chest syndrome, which is a type of pneumonia. So people that, the one of the primary manifestations of COVID, with lung infection, that can really be detrimental to the health of individuals with COVID-19 is to get an infection. And so, the same precautions that the CDC recommends works for people with COVID, with sickle cell disease as well. Social distancing, wear your mask, hand washing, using hand sanitizer, those things have kept so many people healthy and kept so many patients with sickle cell disease out of the hospital. Another thing to keep people with sickle cell disease healthy is that they don't go to the emergency room. Their clinicians recommend that they go to what are called infusion centers, which is the place that they go instead of going to the emergency room, because anytime you go to the when things can fall apart, you can get exposed to people there. So when you go to an infusion center and get the fluid that you need or get pain medications that you need, that can stop people from having, a further and a more significant crisis. And so again, Natasha, if you would like to share any information about that and recommendations on, based on your experience. I'm taking over Jackie's show.
No,
but...
you're not. No. This is great information.
Yeah.
Like, no, keep on.
But please, Natasha,
And important.
Yeah,
tell
just
us
to
about your
add,
experience.
no, just to add to what Dr. Miller has said, and I've been fortunate I think during COVID. So I'm working for the Sickle Cell Disease Association. Back when COVID hit, we went into remote like everyone did. And so we have a medical advisory board called MARAC, Medical Advisory Research Board of the Sickle Cell Disease Association. And these are doctors around the world treating sickle cell disease. So when COVID hit, we really jumped on the COVID and sickle cell disease because that was one of the diseases that could adversely be affected by COVID. So if you go to our website, sicklecelldisease.org, you'll see all the information that our medical advisory board has talked about for sickle cell disease, and some of the things Dr. Miller said, like going to infusion center instead of the emergency room. Now I've had to go to the emergency room a couple of times for pain crisis with sickle cell disease, and the hospitals manage it pretty well. And as well as, being hydrated, trying not to be stressed, which can another thing that exacerbates sickle cell, going into a sickle cell crisis. But there's a lot of research being done now with sickle cell disease and COVID because, everybody had to pivot and talk about it. But our advisory board is really looking at all the aspects. And so any new data that's come out, again, we follow the CDC. They recommend people with sickle cell disease get the vaccine. I received the vaccine myself, had no issues with it. And, I still wear my mask when I go out, wash my hands everywhere, stay home as much as I can. And so those recommendations are still working and in place. But again, you can go to our website to get more information.
Let me ask you, what is an infusion center? I've never heard of that. And some folks out there may not be familiar. Can you all just, Natasha, one of you all can just explain what that is for someone who may not know?
An infusion center is where, so what is infusion is infusing either fluids into, it's usually IV fluids into your body, or, blood transfusion. It's being infused into your body. So they call these centers an infusion center because people with sickle cell disease can go into an infusion center and be infused with fluids, or be infused with pain medicine, or be infused with blood, doing blood donation. And so it's just a term. Now there's not a lot of infusion centers around. We are lucky here in Maryland that we have Johns Hopkins and they have an infusion center, but a lot of states around the country does not have an infusion center. So everybody may not be as fortunate to have that. A lot of, I think maybe 5 or 6 states have big sickle cell clinic and infusion centers. So more infusion centers are really needed around the country. That's part of our advocacy work here at the National Office for Sickle Cell Disease, is getting more infusion centers around the country, because infusion center could be maybe an hour or two away, and so the only access could be a hospital for someone with sickle cell disease. Without that, and so imagine going into the hospital with other sick people that could get you sick, or people with COVID. And so it just exacerbates the situation. So infusion center is something that's really for sickle cell disease.
Yeah.
And so it's more needed.
Yeah, yeah. And First Lady, I want to let you bring us home with some final comments and really encourage people, to really take in what they've heard here today and step up and donate blood and just be, do our best to be, this is a time where I think a lot of people are, they're really there's a lot going on in this country right now that's very negative, and a lot of us are fighting about so many things. There's a lot of negative energy going around, and I just, I feel like this is such a positive step forward. This is such a positive conversation to encourage people to help out their fellow man and woman. So I wonder what you could say to encourage people.
I would just say, think about health as it impacts you as an individual. Nobody wants to have a chronic illness. Nobody wants to be sick, but these things do happen. So what I would encourage people to do is to put themselves as best they can in the position of someone like Natasha, who has a chronic illness, and think about, what can I do to help? What would I want someone to do for me? And I think for most of us, the answer would be, number one, understand, have a better understanding, educate yourself about these health disparities that plague our people, particularly painful illnesses like sickle cell. And then number two, I think everyone has already stated it beautifully. Step up, give blood. Don't be afraid, as we said earlier. Let your faith overcome your fears, and just help somebody. This whole thing in the faith-based community is based in love, about doing unto others as we would have them do unto us, about living lives that are whole in mind, body, and spirit. So let's do these things that we talk about. Let's put these lofty goals and these views that we espouse and that we preach so often, let's put them into action and be doers of the word and not just speakers of it. And I think that we'll have a better nation. Some of this negativity will go away. And then on the physical health side, we can help to get rid of some of these disparities that have plagued us for so long.
Yeah. First Lady, why was it so important for the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated to be a part of this, to host this conversation?
We are the largest major denomination. There are so many member churches across this country, and our convention is committed to making our members the healthiest major denomination in this country. I think we gave ourselves a 10-year window, and we're still working on becoming the healthiest. But we came up with that mission, or God directed us toward that mission, because our leadership, Dr. Young and other members of our leadership, really truly believe that if our congregants, as well as the communities that we serve, are healthier, it will just be a better place for everybody. Physical health impacts every other part of our life. It impacts the financial stability of the family. It impacts the church. So it's important. So that's one of the reasons that we felt like this was the right thing for us to do to help get the word out about sickle cell.
Yeah, I like these coffees and conversation. This is really been a great discussion, ladies. I mean, I know that I have learned so much from each and every one of you, and I know the audience out there feels the same. And I want to give, because someone did send me a more specific conversation, I got to unlock my phone. But the website, in case anyone wants a more specific one than what we said earlier, it's redcrossblood.org/ourblood. So I wanted to give that out just in case that was going to help anybody figure out the information. But you can also go to the main Red Cross page, and you'll be directed to find the same information that you'll need. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Coffee and Conversation with the American Red Cross and the National Baptist Convention USA Incorporated. Now, ladies, thank you for sharing your knowledge about sickle cell disease. We've truly learned a lot. I know I have learned so much, and I don't like to talk about age, but I've lived for a while, and I'm telling you, I have learned a lot. You all, each and every one of you are very knowledgeable about all aspects of this disease, blood donation. It really was a great conversation. I actually wish that we had more time, but we don't. But I feel like we covered a lot of ground, and so people were able to get a lot of great information. If you want to learn more, as I said, what was the other address, Yvette? It's redcross.org.
Yes, redcrossblood.org. redcrossblood.org.
Okay, definitely want to give that out to people. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. And ladies, thank you all so much. Next time we have to have some coffee. Or can we, is late, First Lady, can we do cocktails or no? We don't.
Let's do some tea. How about that?
Okay.
Tea. I'm all about tea. Love tea.
We can do coffee too. I drink coffee and it doesn't put me to sleep, so we can do coffee too.
I know this has been so great, ladies. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for tuning in. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Great moderator. Thank you
Pastor
so much.
Minor and Natasha. Thank you.
Thank you all.
What a great conversation. I wish we could just go on and on and on.
It's needed. It
really is. I mean, let me tell you, I have learned so much, like I said, from what you all had to say, and I could just go on and on asking more questions about this disease. I mean, just so many things that I did not know, and I feel like if I don't know, a lot of people out there just don't know.
Yeah, and that's been our biggest issue here at the national office is, getting the word out. And so that's why, we have our convention coming up in October. That's going to talk everything sickle cell. There's lots of different conferences going on throughout September. You can find that on our website as well, sicklecelldisease.org. There's small webinars, there's small conferences. So there's, we just have to get it out there.
Yeah.
Why don't people know more about this? Like, what's the issue?
Fun. I think funding is a big issue.
Absolutely. One of the issues is that there are so many other diseases that
Dr. Miller, excuse me, I'm sorry. I think we're still live streaming, so everyone can hold off. Those that are viewing via Zoom, if you'll just stay on for a few moments.
Okay.
Those that are viewing via social media, Jackie's already thanked you for being here, and I'm gonna thank you again. And we're gonna see what's going on with the technology. Okay. And we're gonna sign off Facebook in just a few seconds. Again, to our Facebook viewers, we thank you so much for being here and apologize for whatever's going on with the technology.
We